a gentle introduction to the sun as a steady presence above your life. You feel the warmth of its light and the quiet force hidden beneath it. The narration eases you into understanding why NASA watches this star with such care. You begin to sense that even ordinary sunlight carries ancient stories. The chapter settles your breath into a slow, reflective rhythm. You rest in a quiet moment, letting your thoughts spread out like soft ripples across a still lake and above you. The sun lingers in the sky, steady, patient, and older than every story you have ever known. You feel its warmth brushing your skin, gentle and familiar, and yet you sense something deeper beneath that easy glow. Something ancient moving behind the light. This chapter opens like a slow inhale, guiding you into the awareness that the sun is not only a source of comfort, but also a powerful star that shapes your days in ways you rarely pause to consider. You breathe in, and the sunlight feels almost personal, as if it has traveled across 93 million miles just to find you. You imagine the photons, tiny packets of energy touching your skin, each one born in the sun's deep and crowded core long before humanity even existed. They arrive softly, but their journey was anything but gentle. You picture them rising slowly through layers of dense plasma, squeezed and slowed, pushed and redirected, taking thousands, sometimes even millions of years to escape from the sun's interior and begin their swift travel through space. Yet by the time they reach you, they feel effortless, as though they simply floated across the sky. You rest inside that thought for a moment. The light that reaches you today may have begun its journey before your ancestors took their first steps, before your land had its familiar shape, before the oceans settled into their slow rhythms. You realize that sunlight is not simply brightness. It is time folded into energy, a record of ancient reactions that still whisper into the present. Each ray is an echo of what the sun once was, long before you ever opened your eyes to it. As you breathe out, you sense how constant the sun feels, so predictable that you rarely question it. It rises, it sets, and in between, it holds the world in balance. Plants open their leaves to it. Rivers find their paths because of it. Winds gather, swirl, and settle because of the warmth it offers. Even your own body responds to it without your awareness. Your skin produces vitamin D. Your internal clock syncs with the shifting light. Your emotions gently sway with the day. The sun anchors your life in subtle ways, guiding your rhythms from a distance. And yet, the sun is not calm in the way you might imagine. Beneath its shining surface lies a churning world of plasma, hot, swirling, and sculpted by magnetic fields that twist, tangle, and unwind. It is peaceful only from a distance, like a fire glimpsed from behind thick glass. NASA watches the sun because its surface is never still. Because even the smallest change in its magnetic behavior can send ripples through the space around us and across the fragile systems humans have built. You pause, letting that thought settle. The sun is not dangerous in a way that seeks harm. It is simply powerful in a way that demands understanding. Its storms, its flares, its eruptions, these are natural expressions of a living star. And like any living thing, it sometimes acts in ways that surprise even the scientists who dedicate their lives to studying it. You imagine NASA's spacecraft as quiet sentinels floating in space, always turned toward the sun, always listening. They track the smallest flickers of energy, the tiniest shifts in ultraviolet light, the subtle tug of magnetic loops rising from the surface. It feels almost like a form of Quran attentiveness that comes not from fear but from respect. The sun is not a threat. It is a force that must be understood, a companion whose moods ripple across the solar system as you sink deeper into the rhythm of the story. You begin to feel the sun not as something far away, but as a presence connected to you through light, warmth, and time. Its energy feeds the plants that feed you. Its gravity holds Earth in its path. Its history is woven into your own, even if you've never thought of it that way. You were shaped by a star without ever having touched it. The warmth on your skin is a soft reminder. The sun is both calm and restless, steady and unpredictable. It gives without hesitation. Yet sometimes its storms reach across space with enough force to disturb satellites, communication networks, and the delicate weave of technology surrounding modern life. And that is why NASA watches not out of fear, but out of awareness. You linger on that thought, imagining the sun as a quiet guardian above your breathing. Its light pours down in endless waves, each one carrying a memory of its long journey. You feel held by its glow, comforted by its steady presence, even as you learn that beneath its calm surface lies a world in motion. You let your mind drift toward that hidden interior, wondering how something so immense can appear so gentle. The sun's surface is only a thin veil, a shimmering skin over great heat. Below it, atoms collide with such force that they merge, releasing energy as light and pressure. This process, nuclear fusion, is the quiet engine of the universe. The same mechanism powering nearly every star in the night sky. You imagine the core not as a violent place, but as a slow, glowing heartbeat, steady and dense. Hydrogen becomes helium in a cycle older than memory, and with each fusion, a pulse of energy begins its long path outward. It feels almost like listening to the rhythm of a distant drum, one that has played every moment of your life without your noticing. You sense how connected you are to that hidden core. The light it produces warms your mornings, shapes your seasons, guides forests, and colors the sky at dawn and dusk. It is easy to forget that all this warmth comes from a heart of fire, a place so dense that a single teaspoon of its material would outweigh mountains. And yet, here you are, absorbing the soft end of that ancient process with each breath. The thought lingers like a quiet echo. The sun's surface is calm, but its core is a world of pressure and transformation. A place where light begins its journey. A place you have never seen, yet one that shapes every moment of your life. As your breathing slows, you feel a gentle pull toward that hidden center, as if the story is inviting you to drift beyond the surface and into the glowing depths where the sun's true heartbeat resides, waiting quietly for you. You drift inward, imagining the sun's core as a silent, glowing pressure of creation. Nuclear fusion unfolds like a slow cosmic heartbeat, shaping the energy that reaches Earth. You see fusion not as danger, but as an elegant, continuous act of balance. The heat and light feel almost alive, steady and predictable, until they aren't. A soft hint suggests the sun's balance can shift in small but important ways. You begin this chapter by gently letting go of the familiar sunlight you see each day, allowing your mind to slip inward toward the hidden depths of the sun itself. The warm surface, you know, becomes only the first layer, a golden veil stretched over something far more ancient and powerful. As you drift closer in imagination, you feel the brightness fade, replaced gradually by a sense of immense density, as though you were sinking into a core of pure, glowing pressure. Each breath you take feels slower, steadier, more aligned with the rhythm of a star. You picture yourself descending through the outer layers, moving past regions where light struggles to escape, where particles bump into one another thousands of times before finding a direction. It feels like wandering through a crowd so thick that every step takes effort. Yet the mood remains calm, like floating downward through warm fog. You are simply observing, not touching, not disturbing. Eventually, the space around you becomes brighter again, not because it is open, but because you have reached a place where energy is born rather than scattered away. The sun's core emerges in your mind as a silent furnace, not roaring with flames, but glowing with a pressure far beyond anything Earth could ever hold. You do not feel heat in the human sense. Instead, you sense a dense and glowing stillness that creates heat as a byproduct of its own existence. The atoms here behave differently than the ones familiar to your world. The pressure is so intense that hydrogen atoms cannot remain separate. They are pressed together, encouraged, almost forced to join and become something new. This process, nuclear fusion, reveals itself not as a violent burst but as a slow, steady heartbeat of creation. You imagine each fusion event as a tiny spark, forming helium while releasing a whisper of energy. Billions upon billions of whispers rise at every moment, blending into the constant pulse that sustains the star. It is a gentle image, surprisingly serene, as though the sun is meditating within its own center, repeating a mantra of transformation. You feel yourself floating in that rhythmic glow, noticing how fusion feels more like harmony than aggression. You reflect on how the energy born here begins its long journey outward. It will take ages to travel from these deep layers to the surface, drifting through dense plasma like a traveler moving through a maze without clear direction. A photon may bounce, twist, and turn millions of times before finding a rare open path. You find comfort in the slowness of it, the patience of light rising through the sun's interior. In this imagined space, nothing rushes. The universe is in no hurry at all. As you continue drifting through this glowing core, you become aware of a delicate balance at play. Fusion depends on pressure, temperature, and density, all intertwined like a carefully woven net. If one strand shifts slightly, the whole pattern must adjust. Yet the sun has spent billions of years maintaining this balance so reliably that your world depends on it without question. The predictability of daylight, the seasons, and even the winds all come, in a distant way, from this quiet equilibrium deep inside the star. You imagine the protons inside the sun behaving like dancers moving in an ancient choreography. They collide, merge, transform, and release energy, each movement essential to the stability of the whole. If they moved a little, the sun would cool and collapse. If they moved too much, it would swell and burn too fiercely. But for now, they follow the cosmic pattern with gentle precision. You sense how miraculous it is that stars maintain such order, how they thrive on the edge between expansion and collapse without faltering. As your awareness settles more deeply into the core, you sense the unimaginable density around you. A teaspoon of this material, if removed and placed on Earth, would weigh more than a mountain. It is a place of extremes wrapped in quietness, where gravity squeezes matter into forms that feel almost abstract. And yet, you experience it in your mind as something soft, something luminous, something breathing in a way that makes your own breaths feel small and delicate by comparison. You let yourself float upwards slightly, as though rising toward layers that lie just above the core. Here, the density loosens, but the brightness remains overwhelming. The plasma becomes a shifting sea of charged particles, each one woven into magnetic fields that bend and twist like slow currents. You see how the sun is not merely a ball of fire but a living ocean of energy, always moving, always shaping itself in ways that ripple outward into the solar system. The sun's behavior, you realize, depends deeply on what happens in this core. Any slight change in the rate of fusion, even a subtle shift invisible to the naked eye, can quietly influence the star's surface. It does not happen quickly. The sun does not lurch or flash in response. Instead, the adjustments echo outward over long spans of time, like a whisper traveling through layers of cloth. Still, the core's consistency is what keeps everything stable. It is the hidden foundation behind every sunrise you have ever seen. You breathe softly as you picture the sun maintaining itself, not through effort or will, but through natural laws that operate with remarkable grace. Gravity pulls inward. Pressure pushes outward. Fusion feeds the pressure. The pressure sustains fusion. It is a cycle so elegant that it asks nothing of you except awareness. You find yourself leaning into that awareness, recognizing that even massive, fiery stars have their forms of balance, their quiet acts of endurance. Yet, in this serenity, you detect a subtle tension, not a threat, but a truth. The sun's balance is not perfect. It shifts slowly over time, responding to deep interior conditions in ways that scientists still study with care. Sometimes the core burns slightly more quickly, sometimes slightly more slowly. These variations are natural, part of the sun's long life. But they also remind you how dynamic stars truly are, how alive they appear when viewed through the lens of physics rather than fear. You reflect on how tiny changes at the core can influence magnetic fields far above, fields that later shape solar flares and storms. It feels almost poetic. A calm heartbeat deep within the sun can eventually echo outward as a storm strong enough to reach Earth. You hold that idea briefly, feeling its gentle weight. The connection between the peaceful center and the active surface becomes clearer, like two ends of a single breath. You let yourself drift outward a little more, sensing the warmth that will someday reach Earth as sunlight. It has not yet become the rays that touch your skin or brighten your sky, but its journey has begun. You feel the potential of it, the promise of illumination moving slowly upward through dense layers. And in that slow ascent, you sense the hint of something else, a shift in the magnetic patterns that lie ahead, a stirring that will soon become a solar storm. You take one last breath inside this imagined core, aware of its steadiness and its subtle restlessness. You understand now that the sun's heart is both peaceful and powerful, both quiet and filled with motion. As you rise gently toward the next chapter, you hold onto that feeling, knowing that above this calm center, something begins to twist, something begins to gather, something begins to wait, something preparing to rise from the silence. You learn how solar storms grow from magnetic knots twisting beneath the surface. The sun's calm face hides powerful tempests that gently crackle, then erupt. Images form of loops of plasma rising like slow-motion ocean waves. You begin to understand why these storms matter to Earth. A quiet question lingers. What happens when a storm grows too large? You begin this chapter by imagining the sun from a distance again, its golden surface appearing smooth, warm, and endlessly calm. From where you stand on Earth, the sun seems like a steady lantern suspended in the sky, unchanging except for its rising and setting. But now that you have drifted through its glowing core, you carry a new awareness with you. You know something moves beneath that calmness. Something twists. Something gathers. Something waits. You let yourself float closer in your mind. approaching the sun's surface as if you were gliding down toward a vast glowing sea. The patterns you see from afar, swirls, speckles, bright patches, now feel more alive. Each one marks a place where magnetic forces are folding and unfolding, weaving lines of tension beneath the layers of plasma. The plasma itself behaves like fluid light, responding to these magnetic threads the way ocean water responds to unseen currents. You pause at the edge of this imagined sea, watching how bright loops rise gently above the surface. At first, they seem slow and graceful, like arcs of molten silk. These loops are the shape of magnetic fields, carrying charged particles along their paths, holding glowing plasma in their curved grip. You sense the quiet power inside them, as if each loop is a held breath waiting for release. They appear peaceful, but they are not entirely at rest. They tremble slightly, swaying under the pressure of their own complexity. The sun's magnetic field is not simple or smooth. It twists and tangles as plasma churns below the surface, dragging magnetic lines with it. You imagine a string being twisted again and again between your fingers. As the twists build, tension grows, and the string must eventually snap into a new shape. The sun behaves in a similar way. Magnetic knots form as fields become stressed, stretched, and wound up by the constant motion inside the star. These knots become the seeds of solar storms. You drift a little closer to one magnetic knot, sensing its silent intensity. At first it feels stable, just another bright knot among billions. But as you listen more closely, not with your ears, but with your awareness, you sense a subtle strain, a tightening. It does not happen quickly. It builds slowly, like a gentle pressure in the air before a thunderstorm. The plasma here pulses in slow waves, rising and falling as if it is trying to release itself. Every detail feels quiet, meditative, yet beneath it lies the possibility of sudden transformation. The sun's entire surface behaves like this. Calm areas hide movements underneath, and active regions glow more brightly as magnetic fields intensify. Sunspots appear dark patches that look cold, though they are incredibly hot, simply cooler than the surrounding regions. They form where magnetic flux pushes upward, blocking some of the rising heat. You see them as dim anchors to the invisible magnetic structures above. Their presence signals that energy is gathering, that something beneath the surface is stirring. You imagine gliding over a pair of sunspots, side by side, connected by a powerful magnetic arc. Plasma travels along this invisible bridge, glowing like slow-moving fire. Even though everything moves at enormous speeds, the scale makes it feel slow, like watching tides from a great height. These bridges of energy can grow taller and brighter as the magnetic tension increases. If the tension becomes too great, the arc breaks, releasing energy into space in the form of a solar flare. A solar flare emerges in your mind not as an explosion, but as a sudden brightening light bursting outward in a flash faster than your breath. X-rays, ultraviolet waves, and particles stream outward at incredible speeds. Still, you experience it here as a soft spreading of brightness, a quickening of the light rather than an aggressive blast. You understand now that flares are the sun's way of rearranging itself, resolving knots that have become too tangled to hold. But not all storms are just flares. Some become larger, heavier, more forceful. You picture a magnetic field line twisting until it can no longer contain the plasma trapped inside. When it finally snaps open, the plasma surges outward, leaving the sun in a massive cloud called a coronal mass ejection, a CME. This is not a burst of light. It is a physical wave of charged particles flying into space, carrying with it magnetic patterns that interact with everything they encounter. You imagine following one of these clouds as it rises from the sun. It moves slowly at first, like a tide pulling away from shore. Then it gains speed, pushed by the energy behind it, expanding as it travels outward. In your mind, you float within the edge of the cloud, watching particles spread across a vast region of space. The scale is enormous, the movement graceful, the silence all-encompassing. It feels less like a storm and more like a shift in the space between worlds. But storms do matter, especially when they head toward Earth. The particles and magnetic fields in Acme can compress Earth's magnetic shield, creating bright auroras, interfering with satellites, and sometimes disturbing power grids. You imagine Earth's magnetosphere reacting like a protective bubble, bowing inward under pressure, then rippling outward again. Even in the face of such forces, Earth remains mostly safe, shielded by its magnetic field and atmosphere. Still, the effects remind humanity how connected it is to the sun's moods. You take a slow breath as you think about this connection. The sun's storms are not malicious. They are part of its natural life. They are reminders that stars are dynamic, living systems. You find comfort in understanding them, seeing them not as threats, but as expressions of energy seeking balance. The same magnetic forces that help create storms also contribute to the sun's long-term stability, guiding its cycles, shaping its patterns, and revealing its hidden rhythms as you drift back again to the sun's surface in your imagination. You watch multiple loops rising and falling like a glowing ocean. Some sway gently, some shimmer with tension, some brighten suddenly as energy escapes. You see how the sun's storms begin, not with a roar, but with a quiet twist. A patient gathering of force beneath a surface that seems so steady from afar. The more you observe, the more you feel that the sun is a dancer moving slowly through its own choreography, even when its motions ripple across the solar system. You recall the core you visited in the previous chapter, the dense, glowing heart where energy is born. Now you see how that energy travels outward and interacts with magnetic fields near the surface. The whole star becomes a layered symphony, each region influencing the others. The calm center supports the restless outer layers, and the outer layers send their storms across the quiet of space. Everything is connected, from the smallest change in the core to the largest eruption above. As you linger over these thoughts, a gentle question begins to form, quiet but persistent. The sun has always balanced itself, always released tension through flares and storms. But what if a storm grew larger than usual? What if the patterns shifted enough to send a truly massive eruption outward? The question hangs softly at the edge of your awareness, not fearful, just curious. You let that curiosity guide your breath as you rise slowly from the sun's surface, drifting upward into the open space above. The loops of plasma grow smaller below you, the bright regions blur into the golden glow, and the star becomes calm again from a distance. Yet you know now that beneath this calm, storms begin in silence, building slowly, waiting for their moment to rise, waiting to show what happens when the sun forgets to be gentle. You follow a photon's long journey from the sun's core to the space around you. The narration shows how different kinds of light, visible, ultraviolet X-rays, carry their own stories. Some forms of light comfort your world. Others challenge the planet's systems. The space between danger and safety becomes clearer, softer. A final whisper points to something even faster than light. The sun's invisible warnings, Here in this gentle darkness, you follow a photon beginning its long release. It drifts through crowded layers where particles press closely in shimmering silence. You imagine the photon waiting patiently as currents of heat fold around it. Every movement feels slow, even though the energy is restless beneath the weight. You sense the sun shaping its light through pressure older than your world. As the photon rises, it weaves through plasma that churns like a quiet tide. Nothing rushes here. Creation feels soft, despite its unimaginable force within. You picture the radiation zone, stretching outward like a deep, glowing labyrinth. The photon nudges through this maze, meeting countless interruptions along its path. Each interruption bends its story, changing direction, but never erasing its purpose. Here, in this gentle darkness, you follow a photon beginning its long release. It drifts through crowded layers where particles press closely in shimmering silence. You imagine the photon waiting patiently as currents of heat fold around it. Every movement feels slow, even though the energy is restless beneath the weight. You sense the sun shaping its light through pressure older than your world. As the photon rises, it weaves through plasma that churns like a quiet tide. Nothing rushes here. Creation feels soft, despite its unimaginable force within. You picture the radiation zone, stretching outward like a deep, glowing labyrinth. The photon nudges through this maze, meeting countless interruptions along its path. Each interruption bends its story, changing direction, but never erasing its purpose. Here, in this gentle darkness, you follow a photon beginning its long release. It drifts through crowded layers where particles press closely in shimmering silence. You imagine the photon waiting patiently as currents of heat fold around it. Every movement feels slow, even though the energy is restless beneath the weight. You sense the sun shaping its light through pressure older than your world. As the photon rises, it weaves through plasma that churns like a quiet tide. Nothing rushes here. Creation feels soft, despite its unimaginable force within. You picture the radiation zone, stretching outward like a deep, glowing labyrinth. The photon nudges through this maze, meeting countless interruptions along its path. Each interruption bends its story, changing direction, but never erasing its purpose. Here, in this gentle darkness, you follow a photon beginning its long release. It drifts through crowded layers where particles press closely in shimmering silence. You imagine the photon waiting patiently as currents of heat fold around it. Every movement feels slow, even though the energy is restless beneath the weight. You sense the sun shaping its light through pressure older than your world. As the photon rises, it weaves through plasma that churns like a quiet tide. Nothing rushes here. Creation feels soft, despite its unimaginable force within. You picture the radiation zone, stretching outward like a deep, glowing labyrinth. The photon nudges through this maze, meeting countless interruptions along its path. Each interruption bends its story, changing direction, but never erasing its purpose. Here, in this gentle darkness, you follow a photon beginning its long release. It drifts through crowded layers where particles press closely in shimmering silence. You imagine the photon waiting patiently as currents of heat fold around it. Every movement feels slow, even though the energy is restless beneath the weight. You sense the sun shaping its light through pressure older than your world. As the photon rises, it weaves through plasma that churns like a quiet tide. Nothing rushes here. Creation feels soft, despite its unimaginable force within. You picture the radiation zone, stretching outward like a deep, glowing labyrinth. The photon nudges through this maze, meeting countless interruptions along its path. Each interruption bends its story, changing direction, but never erasing its purpose. Here, in this gentle darkness, you follow a photon beginning its long release. It drifts through crowded layers where particles press closely in shimmering silence. You imagine the photon waiting patiently as currents of heat fold around it. Every movement feels slow, even though the energy is restless beneath the weight. You sense the sun shaping its light through pressure older than your world. As the photon rises, it weaves through plasma that churns like a quiet tide. Nothing rushes here. Creation feels soft, despite its unimaginable force within. You picture the radiation zone stretching outward like a deep, glowing labyrinth. The photon nudges through this maze, meeting countless interruptions along its path. Each interruption bends its story, changing direction, but never erasing its purpose. Here, in this gentle darkness, you follow a photon beginning its long release. It drifts through crowded layers where particles press closely in shimmering silence. You imagine the photon waiting patiently as currents of heat fold around it. Every movement feels slow, even though the energy is restless beneath the weight. You sense the sun shaping its light through pressure older than your world. As the photon rises, it weaves through plasma that churns like a quiet tide. Nothing rushes here. Creation feels soft, despite its unimaginable force within. You picture the radiation zone stretching outward like a deep, glowing labyrinth. The photon nudges through this maze, meeting countless interruptions along its path. Each interruption bends its story, changing direction, but never erasing its purpose. And in that drifting motion, you begin to sense how even light carries time, shaping not only what you see, but what you feel, and gently leading you toward the faint, invisible warnings that move ahead of it. You drift with the solar wind, a gentle but constant stream of charged particles. It feels like an ever-present breath from the sun, shaping the edges of Earth's magnetic shield. You notice how fragile and beautiful this global protection truly is. Solar wind brings both harmony and disruption, depending on its mood. You sense that sometimes this wind carries storms hidden inside it. You drift with the solar wind, a gentle but constant stream of charged particles. It feels like an ever-present breath from the sun, shaping the edges of Earth's magnetic shield. You notice how fragile and beautiful this global protection truly is. Solar wind brings both harmony and disruption, depending on its mood. You sense that sometimes this wind carries storms hidden inside it. You begin by imagining yourself floating far from Earth, in a quiet region where sunlight feels thin yet steady. Here, in this wide openness, the solar wind becomes easier to sense. It does not rush like a storm, and it does not swirl like air. Instead, it moves with a soft persistence, as if the sun is exhaling endlessly. You drift within this stream, letting it carry you gently forward. And you start to understand that this wind is not made of air at all. It is a river of particles, tiny charged messengers, traveling through space with a patience older than Earth itself. You imagine these particles leaving the sun's surface, slipping away from magnetic loops and arcs that rise and fall like slow-motion tides. Some particles escape only when the magnetic fields open, releasing them into interplanetary space. Others drift out steadily, with no drama, no flair, just an ancient rhythm that has played since the sun first ignited. As you watch, you begin to sense that this flow is more than a movement of matter. It is a conversation, one that the sun has with every planet it touches. Every moon, every grain of dust wandering between worlds. You let your awareness sink deeper, following the stream outward. The solar wind becomes a glowing whisper brushing against your skin. It carries warmth that is not heat and motion that is not wind. You see it spreading in all directions, creating a bubble around the solar system known as the heliosphere. This bubble acts like a cocoon, shielding the planets from much of the harsh radiation drifting between stars. Even in its invisibility, the solar wind defines the space where your own world resides. As you drift, you see how the solar wind meets Earth. It encounters the planet's magnetic field the way a river meets a strong stone. Instead of breaking through, it bends gracefully around. The magnetic field stretches and forms a long tail behind Earth, like a soft shadow pulled by the flow. You follow this shape, watching the boundary glow faintly where particles are trapped, redirected, and released. This magnetic field is Earth's silent guardian, and you can feel how delicately it responds to every whisper from the sun. You notice that when the solar wind is gentle, the magnetic field holds strong. It curves smoothly, forming a stable shield that protects everything beneath it. Birds fly, oceans breathe, human lives continue without ever sensing the cosmic wind rushing above them. But you also see that the balance is fragile. When the solar wind strengthens, when the sun exhales more deeply, the magnetic shield trembles and tightens. You watch the boundary ripple like a drum skin struck by an invisible hand. You drift closer and sense how these ripples can trigger auroras, painting the sky with light that seems to fall like rain. Charged particles slip along magnetic paths toward the poles, colliding with atoms high in the atmosphere. The resulting glow feels almost alive, shimmering in greens, reds, and purples. You imagine standing on a dark winter night, watching the sky ripple with cosmic color, unaware that what you see began as a whisper from the sun's distant breath. But the solar wind is not always gentle. You feel subtle shifts within the stream, tiny disturbances that signal something larger hidden within. A knot of magnetic tension from the sun's surface. A burst of particles accelerated by a flare. A cloud of plasma hurled outward from a solar eruption. These storms ride within the wind like seeds inside a traveling current. They do not always release their energy at once. Some drift quietly until they reach Earth, where their arrival reshapes the magnetic field with surprising force. As you float in this invisible river, you sense how these storms feel from within a growing density. A sharpening pressure, a restless pulse inside the otherwise smooth flow. The solar wind begins to feel less like a gentle breath and more like a distant heartbeat. You imagine the sun pulsing with stored energy, sending out warnings long before any visible flare appears. The particles around you vibrate with potential, not yet disruptive, but no longer entirely calm. You think of how scientists on Earth measure these changes. Instruments aboard satellites listen to the solar wind the way a doctor listens to a patient's breath. Variations in particle speed, density, temperature, and magnetic alignment reveal the sun's shifting moods. You picture these satellites floating high above the planet, always watching, always listening, absorbing the signals carried through this endless stream. Their data helps predict when the solar wind may bring harmony or disruption. You drift beside one of these silent watchers, feeling the solar wind brush against its metallic surface. The instrument hums gently, turning the invisible flow into something humans can understand. Numbers, patterns, warnings. You realize that the solar wind is not only a force of nature, it is also a messenger of change. It tells the story of the sun's behavior. Long before the light from an eruption ever reaches Earth, the more you travel with this unseen river, the more you notice how deeply it shapes life on your world. It influences communication systems, satellite paths, power lines, even the orientation of tiny grains of dust floating between planets. Every moment, the solar wind is interacting with Earth, even when human senses cannot detect it. This constant interaction becomes a relationship delicate, shifting, quietly powerful. You let that thought settle, like dust drifting slowly downward. In this stillness, you feel grateful for the magnetic field that shields your world. Without it, the solar wind would strip away the atmosphere, unraveling the fragile balance that makes Earth home. You sense how rare this protection is, how many planets and moons are bare to the cosmic wind. Mars flickers into your awareness, its thin atmosphere a reminder of what happens when a world loses its magnetic heart. The solar wind becomes a sculptor there, shaping the planet grain by grain. You drift back into the flow and let your thoughts soften. The solar wind moves around you, patient and infinite. You can almost hear its soft, continuous hush that feels like time itself breathing. You realize that this wind never stops. It has been blowing since long before Earth formed, and it will continue long after your distant descendants look toward other stars. It is a reminder of continuity, of motion that persists even when unseen. You focus on that faint disturbance, letting your curiosity drift toward its quiet motion. The solar wind around you shifts in tone, carrying a slightly sharper edge, like a breeze that stays calm yet hints at something forming far away. The particles brush past with a new texture, still gentle, but touched with a soft tension that invites attention rather than fear. You imagine this small change traveling outward across millions of kilometers, moving slowly, as nearly everything in space does. The solar wind becomes a messenger, offering a quiet preview of energy released long before. By the time these particles reach Earth, the sunlight from any eruption will already have passed. Yet the deeper message, the one carried by charged particles, moves on its own deliberate schedule, and as you drift with this unfolding signal, you wonder what shape the coming disturbance might take, and how its arrival will stir the magnetic shield around your world. You sense its approach growing closer with time,